So these were sort of the grabs that we got, because when you were registering, a lot of you wrote what you were looking to hope to get from the session. So what I have done, just to make life really simple, is often when people think about emotional intelligence, if I ask any of you, which, and you're welcome to write it in the chat if you want to, what do you think is the key to emotional intelligence? So many people, time and time again, when I'm speaking to them, will say words like empathy, will say words like building good connections with other people, building relationships and so on. But what's really interesting is it's much more than empathy. And I wanted to just briefly touch on that. So this gentleman, Daniel Goleman, a very long time ago, I think it was 1995, wrote a book simply called Working with Emotional Intelligence. And essentially, he has very simply, and if you haven't read the book, feel free to pick it up and read it. He's divided it up into little bits. And so what I'm going to try and do for the next 45 minutes or so is explain each little bit by itself so that you can begin to understand what this means to you personally. But in case you're wondering, why do you even care? Why do you even need to know it? Enough research has been done that emotional intelligence is crucial to being a better leader. I think we all already know that. This is now old news. But certainly 20 years ago, 30 years ago, everybody talked about IQ and the importance of our intelligence, and never talked about these so-called soft skills about, touchy-feely, who cares if you don't show empathy, who cares if you don't do that? But actually the whole understanding of emotional intelligence is really what makes you a better employee, a better employer, a better leader. And if you're not if some of you perhaps who are attending are not working in organizations, it just improves your relationships. And so all of these things are very, very important because it's about us as human beings and how we connect with the people that we're talking to or communicating with for whatever reason. Okay, so what Daniel Goleman said in his book very simply is that there are 5 domains. So 5 domains of emotional intelligence: self-awareness, self-management, self-motivation, empathy, and finally, which is kind of the 5th domain, this point of bringing it all together. Now, what does that mean? The main point I want to show you in this slide is that, have you noticed that 3 out of 5 are about me, myself, and I? Most of us, when we're thinking about emotional intelligence, think about me and you. But me and you are not going to work if we haven't started thinking about me alone. So the point of emotional intelligence, which so many people haven't acknowledged, is it starts with us. It starts with us without any extraneous human being. It is only about how I am interacting with myself. And it's only when I have become more self-aware, and I'm going to explain these points to you in just a minute, learn to manage myself, learn to self-motivate. And it's really only when these 3 things come in that I am then going to be able to have the wherewithal to show empathy, to improve my relationships, to be better leaders, managers, friends, lovers, husbands, wives, parents, whatever it is that you're looking to do. So that's the point. And that, I think, is the key. Because so many people think, we're very emotionally intelligent, we have so many good friends, we get along so well with people. But what about me? Me, myself, and I, number 1. And that really, if anything, that I want for you to take away as a key takeaway, it's that the main point is first think about you as how you react, and only then can you think of other things. In relation to that, some of you know that I work a lot with unconscious bias. Now, unconscious bias essentially means that you jump to a conclusion, you have an assumption, and you have no idea that assumption. So unconscious bias and emotional intelligence are like this. And why am I choosing Aristotle and the further ones that you will also read is the point of emotional intelligence is something new. We have been talking about this for hundreds of thousands of years. Except for whatever reason, it was kind of dropped and went off by the wayside. And it's only in the last 20 years or so that people have begun to acknowledge how important it is for us as human beings to be more aware of our own selves, which then impact on how we interact with others. Okay, so the first point of emotional intelligence, the first domain, as Daniel Goleman calls it, is improving your self-awareness. So now, it's very interesting because it was entirely random. I was thinking about this workshop that I was about to do, this webinar, and I was doing some exercise and listening to a podcast this morning. And I was hearing this podcast where this psychologist was being interviewed for a podcast about emotions and feelings. And the point that she made is that, which I found, which is exactly the point I'm just about to make, which is the fact that many of us, and she's a psychologist, that's what she does for a living. She offers therapy to people who have issues and who need help in terms of whatever the issue might be. And she says, accept your emotions. So many of us, we might wake up in the morning and you just have this funny feeling in your tummy and you think, I'm not sure, I just don't feel right. We've all had that feeling. But what we tend to do is we just bury it, we push it aside, and then we just get on with life. Well, it's actually not going to go away. You've got to acknowledge that there's something not right, and you have no idea why that something is not right because you haven't thought about it. So accept your emotions, whether they makes you want to cry, makes you want to laugh, makes you can't even articulate it. It's just a funny feeling in your tummy. Could be any of those things. But acknowledge that there's something not right. And then only can you start thinking about what you're going to do about it. Also, a lot of people berate themselves. They're very, very hard on themselves. And that's no good at all, because the more hard you are on yourself, the less you are going to be successful. And the only person who's being let down is actually you. That's the irony. So don't be hard on yourself. None of us are godlike. We're just simple, good old-fashioned human beings. We will make mistakes. We have pluses, we have minuses. That's what makes us interesting as human beings. So appreciate that you've got good stuff and you've got not so good stuff. So big deal. It's fine, not a big deal. The third one is actually very interesting because a woman, what was her name? Rita Sharon. She was, or perhaps still is, I don't know, teaching at Columbia University, and she was teaching medical students. And she found that when the medical students at some point obviously have to then go and see patients. And what was happening with these students is that when they were going to go and see the patients, they were not able to put all the learning they had got in their heads and they had studied properly because they were getting emotional. So maybe they were seeing an old man lying in bed with some illness and they were remembering their grandfather or something. So she said, what you need to do is create an emotional journal. And when she means emotional journal, it's not a dear diary, today I went for a walk and it's not about that. It's much more about writing the emotions that you feel. Now, this has actually been proven. There is enough research done that if you, and same, funnily enough, the podcast I heard this morning was also talking about that. So it was so coincidental that I heard that, and then I was doing the session, 1 hour later. But the point about the emotional journal is you're only talking to yourself, and you're writing it or you're typing it, whichever way you want to do things, entirely up to you, in a book. I'm going to say writing, I'm old-fashioned. So there is my book, and there it is, I'm writing in it. And every evening I open the book, or every morning, I'd say every evening, it's a better time to do it, and just write a few pages. The point of doing that is that it leaves you, and now you're looking at it, and it looks distance from you. So you're managing your emotions slightly different. Listen to the message. What does that mean? That message, that funny feeling in your stomach, that funny feeling in whatever is going on in your life, whatever that might be, listen to it, acknowledge it. Take a walk in their shoes. Now you're going to ask me, what do you mean, their shoes? I thought this was me, myself, and I. It is me, myself, and I. But acknowledge that all of us have stories. This is about our unconscious bias. And I don't know what your story is. I have no idea why you said something so rude to me or whatever it is that upset me. Everyone's got their stories. Acknowledge that we've got different ways that we're managing our stories. So that's, and as I'm saying, this is a very short period of time. So I'm literally, dropping these bits in there for you to start thinking about for later. And we'll have some questions as well. So here's another point to ponder. I'm sure many of us, are racked with anxiety because somebody said something bad and they feel, they don't like me very much and all kinds of things come into our head. Well, what's the point? Don't hate yourself for it, because there will be lots of people who may not like you or have something against you. But if you don't start believing in yourself first and foremost, there's not a lot you can do about your other relationships. Me, myself, and I, please. I mean, and I'm using the word selfish in a positive connotation. If you don't start thinking about yourself first, how on earth can you start thinking about others? So the next thing I'm going to talk to you about is self-management. Now, what does self-management mean? I'll tell you what it means. Very simply put, it's the voices in our head. So all of us, even right now, when you're listening to me, you're talking to yourself. You're thinking about stuff and you're talking to yourself. So it's the voices in our head. And so when I'm saying methods of improving self-management, it is how do we manage the voices in our head? So, I'm just going to make up a story, I suppose, to put it into context. So let's imagine that you're at work and you absolutely are completely, totally petrified of making presentations, of standing up and talking to people. And your boss has said to you, today's Friday. So next Friday, you have to make a presentation. And, the chief executive, everybody's going to be coming. There'll be 50 people in the room. And you have to speak for 20 minutes. And you're completely freaking out because you are not comfortable in making presentations. The chances are between today and next Friday morning or even Thursday night, you're waking up and going to bed every night saying, oh, sugar, what am I going to do? I'm going to be useless. I'm going to fail. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be da-da-da-da-da-da. All you're doing is using language that is reinforcing the belief in your head, which is also connected to our unconscious biases, about the fact that I don't like presentations and I am no good at them. Now, it's much easier said than done. Any of the things that I'm saying to you are just pictures and words up here. In real life, they're not that easy. So, but you've got to do it because you've got to accept that if you don't consciously change your attitude, it's going to make life much harder for you. So, anchor your positive feelings. Now, this is a really interesting one. Barack Obama, and it's a true story because I happen to know somebody who actually worked in the larger section of Obama's government when he was in power. Barack Obama, somebody gave him a Hanuman. And I'm assuming everybody in this group are Indian, so we know who Hanuman is. And Hanuman has the ability to become this small and go through keyholes and become this big and get his tail and, burn up an entire village if he needs to. And the story goes that Obama used to put this Hanuman in his pocket with his suit, and he went into work every day and put it in his pocket. And what he would do is he'd put his hand gently into his pocket and literally just hold it in his hand. I don't have a Hanuman to show you if you know what I mean, but literally hold it in his hand to anchor his feelings, a physical manifestation to remind him that he can be as small or as big based on the situation that he was going to be in. Now, if Obama can do it, come on, we can do it too, okay? So find something physical. Some of us wear glasses. Some of us may wear a necklace all the time. Some of us may wear earrings. Some of us might wear a watch or a ring, something that you are wearing all the time. And now you're with somebody and you're talking to them, and that person is really annoying you. And you want to try and manage, self-manage. Very discreetly, so let's imagine it's a ring. Very discreetly, just hold your ring and just remind yourself, this is giving me the energy to calm myself, to anchor my positive feelings. Challenge your own negative self-talk. Again, easier said than done. Have a positive mental attitude. Now, there's a Nobel Prize winning psychologist, Daniel Kahneman, who says that the research has been done that we are genuinely, when we're born, our wiring is half empty, half full. And some of us are lucky enough, like I know I am for myself, born with a positive mental attitude. There are many people in my life who I know and love, friends, family, and so on, who are born with a negative mental attitude. For those of you who are born like that, you've got to work at it. It's much harder than it is for me. For me, it comes easy. It may not come so easy for you, but that doesn't mean you can't do it. You've got to work at it. Live life with an abundance mentality. So in fact, especially during coronavirus times, most of us don't meet other human beings, don't leave our homes. And now that I'm back in London, I was at lockdown in Delhi for almost 5 months. I can go for walks, but some of us can't even do walks in India, depending on where you are, because the building you might be living in might have their own regulations about walking downstairs or using the lift or whatever. How are you then going to live life with an abundance mentality? It is really about acknowledging that we have so much. You know, you've got food on our table, we've got warmth, we've got the ceiling fan to give us air, whatever it might be. Focus on the good things rather than the bad things. And it's hard when you're going through your own trials and tribulations, but you've got to keep working at it. And the good news is our brain, and research has confirmed this, has neuroplasticity. So what does that mean? It's like plasticine, and the more you work at it, the more you stretch it, the more it will actually make a difference. That's all it is. Keep working at it. Here's another quote for you. 13th century. Okay, so the third of the me, myself, and I bits. So we've talked briefly about self-awareness. I'm looking at the time, it's coming up to 11:30. Sorry, I'm speaking my time, but you know yours. And I also want to keep time for question and answers. We've talked about self-awareness. We've talked about self-management. So self-awareness is about feeling the stuff within us. How do we feel? It's about feelings, genuine feelings. I wake up with a funny feeling in my stomach or something like that. Self-management is about the self-talk. What's going on in my head? What am I saying to myself? What can I do differently? Now, self-motivation puts these two things together, and then only can you do something. So, for example, if we go back to the presentation example, and now next Friday I have to make this presentation, I'm petrified, I don't like doing it, how am I going to do it? If you go back to the first two things, the self-awareness and the self-management, you will recognize that the only way you can motivate yourself to do as good a presentation as you are capable of doing is first by acknowledging that maybe you're not so good, but you're going to do the best you can, and then by managing your self-talk. So focus on fact that, listen, very simply put, if I don't do this presentation next Friday, my boss is going to sack me. Maybe that's your motivation. Maybe it's just as basic as that. Well, that's a good enough motivation to want to make a difference in how you create that presentation. When you're thinking about other bigger achievements, so many of us often have dreams and plans for the future. Now, January the 1st, 2020, many of you might have started the year saying, oh yeah, I've got, by the end of this year, I'm going to be doing this and this and this and this. And we all know that you've probably not been able to do most of it because the entire world is going down a different path at the moment. And I'm sorry to say, but I personally believe that coronavirus is going to be around for a while longer. Next year, this time, I suspect we could still be having the same conversation. So if that's the case, what then? How are you going to manage to set dates for your goals? How are you going to manage to set milestones, real date milestones? How are you going to actually look forward to something? Easier said than done, right? So it's very much about acknowledging that change is going on in your life right now. You cannot be self-aware and self-manage yourself and self-motivate yourself if you don't embrace change. It is crucial for us to embrace change. And what was so interesting, and I was actually acknowledging that for my own self. So I arrived in Delhi early first week of March, and I was going to be there for a full sum total, Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, for 3 weeks work. And almost 5 months later, I left Delhi to come back to London. And in those almost 5 months that I lived in Delhi, I was lucky because I lived in a home. I left one family in London and I had another family in India. So I was with my mother, who I haven't spent 5 months with in I can't remember how many years, and my brother. But what was interesting is that coronavirus being so bad in India, I actually never left the house. We were very, very lucky we have a garden. So what did we do? I had literally house, garden, house, garden. And I did nothing else. But was I miserable? Was I unhappy? Was I not planning? Was I not motivating myself? I was very productive. For the entire time that I was there, other than talking to my own immediate family who I was living with, I hardly spoke to anyone. But I focused, I was productive. I managed to create milestones. I actually, if some of you know, I started a podcast, which I started in, I think it was April, I've forgotten now. So there was things I was doing and I was busy. It's so easily, I could have gone the other way. I could have sat there and said, I am stuck. I am missing my children. I am missing my husband. I'm so unhappy. I don't want to be in Delhi. It's so bloody, whatever. I could have thought of all kinds of different things, but it didn't even occur to me to say that. To me, this was precious time that I'm probably never going to get again. This kind of time with my mother, my God, how lucky am I? That's how I saw it. So it's about using the language, thinking differently. So empathy. Now we've talked about the me, myself, and I. The intrapersonal. Intrapersonal means me, myself, and I. We have self-awareness, self-management, self-motivation. These are the key. There is no way that you can even begin to think that you have wonderful empathy skills if you have not acknowledged these three things in your life and started learning to improve them. So now we've hopefully got there. We're getting, we've thought about it. And now we're talking about me and you, interpersonal skills. When we're talking, and these are, I'm sure many of you have heard all of these things before, there's nothing new in this. When we're talking about being a supportive listener, again, easier said than done, it is very much about, are we able to listen to what they are saying, or are we listening to what we want to hear? We all have our own stories, and what we tend to do is we finish off your self-management, your talk is going on in your head, I'm saying something to you, and you've already finished my sentence in your own head, because you think it should go down this path. Think about the number of times you've been having conversations with friends and family, and before they've even finished, you've interrupted them. And then they look at you and say, how do you know that? And you say, see, I'm so, But sometimes you have come completely down the wrong path because you've assumed that's what they're thinking. So genuinely listen to what they are saying rather than what you think they're saying. Often repeat back. Keep your emotional perspective. Sometimes they could be telling you about something horrendous in their lives, which you also personally experienced a long time ago. Well, this is not about you. This is about them. So listen to their story rather than bringing your story in. Often somebody says something to you that you may not be comfortable with. You don't like the point they're making, but if you are genuinely a good friend, listen in terms of how, let them understand that you're not going to show your own personal opinion on it. This is about them, this is not about you. This is empathy, this is not sympathy. There's a big, big difference. I bet many of you know this one because this has been going on for a long time. Now this one is the fifth, and then I wanted to show you what I call the 8 habits of emotional resilience. And then we will open for question answers as well. Improving your relationship handling skills. So often what tends to happen is when we are communicating with somebody else and we're trying to build relationships, it is very much about winning and losing. And this is when the issues begin. Because it's not about winning and losing. It is not about egos. It is about the fact that all of us have our own unconscious biases, our own narratives, our own stories. We all come to the table with stuff. And I don't know what your stuff is. But I want to build a relationship with you. And I have no idea. Maybe you're a new colleague in my department. And I have no idea what that kind of stuff looks like. So what then can I do? It's about recognizing and acknowledging that when I am building my relationship with you personally, or with a new company, or with a department, it is very much about acknowledging that we're all there with different stories coming into the room. And whether it's a Zoom room or whether it's a real room is besides the point. So acknowledge that, allow others to have emotion. And when I'm talking about building rapport, it's very much about trying to, if I go back to the previous one about empathy and listening, really trying to communicate in the language they want to hear, rather than in the language that you feel you must communicate in. I mean, even very instinctively, I don't know if any of you do that, does your accent change depending on where you are and who you're speaking to? I am very fortunate. I have a rural connection, and I have an ancestral home in Kerala. Now, when I'm in Kerala and I am speaking English, I don't even notice it, but I'll start changing the pronunciation of some words. So for example, the word SKIRT, which I say as skirt all of my life, suddenly becomes skirt. And for those of you who are from Kerala will totally get what I mean. And because it's like, that's a Malayalam word for me as far as I'm concerned. And it's just weird that even though I know it's an English word, I just feel more comfortable. And I also know that my husband is from Ireland, and if he happens to be in Ireland and he's calling me from there, his accent becomes more Irish than, he already has an Irish accent, becomes even more Irish. So what is that about? Why is it that we instinctively, unconsciously even change how we speak or the words that we use? This is part of our unconscious bias to connect, to build rapport, and to try and speak the same language. And I'm not talking about the same languages and speaking English to each other or Malayalam to each other or all of that, but about having a sense of, I get it. You know what? We know what we're talking about. And the last one, of course, is aim for a win-win. Well, that's the ego bit that I've already talked about. Okay. So this is the one that I want to finally show you, and then we can have Q&A. Now, this is really important because I have had, as all of us have had, ups and downs in our lives. And it is so easy for us to feel sorry for ourselves. So easy. And I'm not saying don't feel sorry for us. A little bit of sorry is fine. Listen, we're only human. So you can stop and have a little cry and say, God, what a horrible little day I had. I'm feeling very sorry for myself. Fine. But don't wallow in it. So once you've done that, move on. Take control of your own power. This embracing change is crucial to become more emotionally resilient. Change is a given. Change is guaranteed. It doesn't matter where you are or what you're doing, change is guaranteed. So acknowledge that. Accept that things aren't in your full control. Now that, if you haven't learned that by, the 6th month of coronavirus, then I don't know when you will learn that. Because all of us started January the 1st with plans on how we're going to be doing X, Y, and Z. And all of us have had those plans scuppered. What does that mean? How are we going to manage things we cannot control? The do not live in the past is really, really important, because many of us, when you're feeling sorry for yourself, look back on the past and think of one of two things. Either say, 10 years ago, I was so successful, I was doing so well, and now look at me. It's coronavirus, I don't even have a job, I am struggling, X, Y, Z. Or look how miserable that was and focus on the negative aspect of your past rather than focusing on all the good stuff that's going on in your life right now. Learn from your mistakes. Well, all of us will make mistakes. There is no question about that, because none of us are perfect. And acknowledge that you are not perfect. Do not beat yourself up for it. Acknowledge that, yes, you will have mistakes, and that's totally okay. So now what can I do the next time? Should I be doing a different path? Can I do it differently? Number 7, funnily enough, I find very hard amongst many people I know. Celebrating other people's success. So now you're going through misery, okay? Absolute hell. the life that you're living at this moment is stressful, to put it mildly. And then a friend calls you. Hi, oh, you know what? I just came first in my university degree, or I've just got a promotion at my job, or I've just got this gorgeous new boyfriend or girlfriend. And you're thinking, huh? I don't want to know about all these wonderful things in your life. Go away. Because you want to wallow in your misery. Are you able to have within you the emotional resilience to genuinely say, congratulations, I am so happy for you. That is so amazing. Are you able to give that little bit of yourself even though you're going through hell? Not easy to do any of these points. Last one, and some of you perhaps are living in large families at the moment where you're literally falling over each other and you can't even find alone time. It's about genuinely finding time for me, myself, and I, because it goes back to right in the beginning. The point of the fact that if we don't acknowledge that it's about us, it's about reflection, it is about how do we see ourselves, it's about the self-awareness, the self-management, the self-motivation, we're not going to become resilient human beings. And I remember hearing somewhere, I don't know if any of you drive or most of you drive, and probably you've all gotten to clean cars at some point. Now today's modern cars in the front, you've got the dashboard, where if, for example, the petrol is low or the battery is overheated or something or the other, a little light pops up. What do? Do you just keep driving, or do you ignore it? Do you ignore it, or do you just stop and do something about it? So we've got our lights popping up in us. And when the light pops up, stop, think, acknowledge, and then do something about it. That's what I'm saying. So I've suggested 8 habits. Listen, you could think of another different 8 habits. It's not, there's nothing set in stone here. It's about what works for you. What works for you is what will make it, what will be important to make you more emotionally resilient. Okay, so I am done, and I would love some questions now.
Thank you so much, Smita, and it was very insightful, listening to all the thoughts that you were sharing. There is a question here on the chat box which says, sometimes people are not aware of their emotions. They like to believe they know themselves very well, but are completely unaware of their unconscious bias. Is it possible to work with them because they doggedly hold their own views of themselves?
First and foremost, it's me, myself, and I. You have to first work with yourself. So the belief that perhaps someone is not emotionally resilient has to come from within them, not because of you. Because all of us know, if I point a finger and say, listen, you've got to improve your emotional resilience, you're going to say, go away. What's to do with you? I know what I'm doing. I'm very good at what I do. Nobody likes to be told they're not good at anything. That's the problem. But what you can do is show by your communication that you want to help them learn to be more emotionally intelligent. So give something of yourself. For those of you in management leadership environments, you might have read about the very old Johari window of communication, where the best window to be in is about trust. It's about, I'm okay and you're okay. And what does that actually mean? It's about giving something of yourself. So when you are talking to that person who you believe is not emotionally intelligent or emotionally resilient, show your vulnerability. Explain to them how you have learned and grown and become more emotionally resilient. And that might ring a bell in their heads, and that might make them think, oh, I wonder whether, that there's, it matches with me too. Perhaps I can begin to think differently. Next question.
Yeah, thank you, Smita. So another person here says, I'm an extrovert. I'm working really hard than ever before. But when things are down, I can't catch up with my support system. Any advice?
Now, I'm wondering what the word support system means and extrovert means, because they mean different things to different people. And a lot of people who know me would assume that I am an extrovert. And yet I didn't have, I wasn't out there partying or talking to people or doing any of that. And I still don't, for however many months it is now, 6 months, 7 months. So when we're talking about support system, are we talking, because I don't know what that means, about, is it friends the question itself is not very clear. Is it about your friends and family who give you a support system? Or is it your own internal support system that is letting you down? I'm not sure which it is, so I'm going to try and respond to both. If it's external support system that you feel is not there for you, then it is very much about your showing your vulnerability, calling your friends and family and saying, hey, I'm feeling low, I'm not managing. Could you talk to me, please? If it's your internal support system, then it goes back to what we were talking about, which is your me, myself, and I bit, which is about, I think what would work really, really well is to create an emotional journal. Get a book, get a computer screen, whatever it is that works for you, and start writing how you're feeling onto that particular page. And then read it. So write something today, read it in the morning. Write tomorrow night, read it the next morning. So I'm not sure which support system you meant. Because whether you're extrovert or introvert, or whether you're comfortable with other people, or whether you like to be by yourself is not the point. It's much more what's going on in our own heads. I hope I've been able to answer your question. Okay, next question.
Next question is, there's a question here. It says, if you are high on emotions and the other is low, how do you deal with such people and manage such situations?
So the question is, what do you want to do? It's about your self-motivation, right? So if you think that that person who is low is somebody who you want to build a relationship with and support, then to begin with, you're going to have to try and manage. Nobody who is feeling low wants this rabbit jumping up and down who's high on emotions. It's like, please go away. I just want to wallow in my own misery. So it's about trying to feel what they are going through, connect with them at their level, and then communicate with them and try and help them get out of that. So I don't know what it is that you want from this. If it's about they are negative, half full kind of people, and they're bringing you down, and you're really not wanting that, then I'm really sorry to say, I would suggest you avoid them. I mean, it is the truth. If you are really feeling much worse because you are around people who are half empty and who are bringing you down, and you're going through your own crises, and you are trying to improve your own mental well-being, then you can't go into somebody's environment who will not help your mental well-being. You've got to be selfish. You've got to protect yourself.
What recommendations would you give to manage mental health during these times?
Those 8 points that I showed you earlier on. Because what is emotional resilience? Resilience is about managing your mental health. How are you going to manage your mental health? Write a diary, talk to people, be aware of yourself and what is going on, acknowledge the stuff that you're going on. And when I say mental health, I don't mean medically diagnosed mental health. Now, I am not a medical practitioner, and I cannot advise somebody who is going through medically diagnosed depression and so on. I'm talking to people who do not have medical diagnoses, but who have genuine mental health worries. They wake up in the morning, they're upset, they're frustrated, they're angry, they're emotionally not doing the best they can. And if that is the case, then my suggestion is try and I'm sure Devika will share the slides with you. I don't know how these things work.
Yes.
But the 8 points that I was saying, think about that, and there is so much out there in terms of trying to help yourself. There are podcasts you can hear. This very random podcast that I happened to hear this morning was entirely about mental health, where this therapist was talking about how we can manage our mental health. And she was saying so many of the things that I just said to you, just coincidentally, about acknowledging that we have feelings. Cry if you want to cry, it's fine, but then move on from it rather than wallow in it. And those kind of things.
Another question here is, this time it's from an introvert. He says, I'm an introvert who hesitates to speak out of turn. How does one deal with verbally aggressive behavior when the other person talks nonstop?
See, that's a slightly bigger question. And firstly, this whole idea of introvert, extrovert, I don't know how we can put ourselves into boxes and lock the door on it, because I think we're a composite of everything. Many of my friends and family would have assumed that I'm an extrovert. I met nobody, I talked to nobody, and I'm actually totally happy with my own company. And the conversations I have are on Zoom, and other than 2 people in the house, which is not a lot of people, as you can imagine. I'm not missing any of the stuff that extroverts supposedly would require to live their lives. Similarly, for introvert too, I'm not comfortable with that phrase. Anyway, I just share a story with you in relation to your question. And this is a true story that I experienced. It's a very old story. It's about 20 years ago. And I had just started working, maybe 20 years ago. I started working in this organization. And I was quite new. And when I joined, there was a colleague of mine who, for whatever reason, didn't like me. And I could do nothing right, let's put it that way. And she, in terms of hierarchy, actually, I was slightly senior to her, but that was by the by. Whatever I did, she would complain to her boss, who would then tell my boss, who would then contact me. So I would get up in the morning and I would come home in the evening miserable. This workplace environment was just really miserable. One day I was driving home and I thought, I can't do this anymore. This person is so nasty and so horrible to me that I'm just going to resign. I can't take it. It's just too much. For whatever reason, I have no idea how, I, from somewhere, had the wisdom, the wherewithal to think differently. So when I woke up in the morning driving into work, I said to myself, I'm going to go into work today and I'm going to make that person my new best friend. I literally used those words, my new best friend. And so I went, and this was a woman. I went in and I just was friendly to her. So I would say, hi, how are you? Did you have a good weekend? Oh, what a lovely blouse you're wearing. Any old nonsense. But I only said nice things to her. I smiled at her. I was positive. Body language, words that came out of my mouth was only good things, always. Fast forward a few weeks, she started calming down. And then fast forward, and then we were never best friends, obviously, but we became friendly and I was getting on with my work. Fast forward maybe a year or two, she said to me, and we were similar age, she said to me that and she didn't apologize for bad behavior, but she said when I joined at that time, she was going through absolute hell because she was going through a very messy divorce and she was miserable and unhappy. And now this is my words. She didn't say this, but this is my theory and I could be wrong. I think she felt threatened by me because I was happy in myself. I was, whatever it was that I was in my life was going through. She didn't like that. She was jealous. And so therefore she was attacking me. Now, why am I sharing this story with you? We all have stories. We have no idea why that person that you just talked about is being aggressive. So think about you, and it doesn't matter whether you're introvert or extrovert or whatever word you want to be. Think about what do you want to get from this communication with that person. Acknowledge that that person has got their stories, they've got their stuff, and you have no idea what's their stuff. And just think positively, rather than taking it on personally. Look, that person is so rude to me. It's all about me. They're making me unhappy. They're making me angry. They're making me. No, it's not about me. This is your stuff. You go and be aggressive. Nothing to do with me. I'm still going to get on with what I want to do. Slightly longer answer, but there you go. Yeah, next question.
Thank you, Smita. So there's a question here from Loretta. She says, how can one have a crucial conversation at the workplace when confronted with a situation like Marcus Aurelius' quote?
Good one. Somebody's raising their hand, by the way. I don't know whether you noticed that. I just noticed when I was talking earlier. So when we're talking, I don't know which quote you're talking about because I showed more than one. But when we're talking about trying to be angry for the right reasons, for the right time, and so on, then it is very much about what does anger look like? And it is about articulating in public, confidently, assertively, calmly with your colleagues that you are not happy with X, Y, or Z. It's not easy to do because you're feeling slightly self-conscious, but it is about saying it. And so when we're talking, is that the quote you meant? Because I want to make sure I'm talking about the right quote. Or is this one? There's one quote was, the value of attentiveness varies in proportion to its object. You're better off not giving the small things more time than they deserve. That was Marcus Aurelius. And then the other one, which was Marcus Aurelius, was, when another blames you or hates you, or people voice similar criticisms, go to their souls, penetrate inside, and see what sort of people they are. You will realize that there is no need to be racked with anxiety. And then there is a third, Marcus Aurelius. The third was Aristotle, I forgot. So these are the two Aurelius quotes. I don't know which one you meant, but so I was thinking about the Socrates, I got mixed up. But whether this one, which is about blaming and hating, or whether it's the other one, which is about attentiveness and not giving the small things more, they're kind of the same answer. It's really about acknowledging that instead of taking everything personally from somebody else, then it is very much, don't blame other people, don't hate other people. Like the example, the story I just shared to the earlier question about my colleague who I could have hated. Instead, don't do that. And blame is another really, really easy one. About trying to say, it's all that person's fault. It takes two to tango, come on. So acknowledge and recognize that you can have your own issues and there are people who have issues themselves. So don't do this blaming, hating business. What's the point?
There is a question here where somebody says, what about spiritual quotient? How is it different from emotional quotient?
Some people have spirituality and feel very strongly about it. Some people don't. So we can't even make an assumption. And what does spirituality mean? Means different things to different people. So I would not make an assumption that there is somebody who I know who is extremely emotionally resilient, but is also practicing atheist. Well, does that person have a spiritual quotient? As far as I'm concerned, they do. Because spirituality to me personally is about one's own spirituality, one's own goodness, one's own values as a human being. So to me, we can be clever and use adversity quotient, and make, create a list of 10 quotients if you want to. But it's simply put, and that's why I like Daniel Goleman's book. It's very simply put, just us. Let's just acknowledge, how do we manage ourselves? What kind of stuff? And then it's about our unconscious biases. What kind of stories have we got? What kind of stuff has got that's going on in our lives that is influencing us without acknowledging it? That's what I would say to that question.
Where somebody says, do you have any tips to practice what you have mentioned in terms of, practicing empathy? What are the 8 steps towards being more emotionally resilient? Is there any tips, quick tips, which we can practice?
No, it's what I've already said, really. I think the main headline, if I was asking you to take away one headline, is acknowledge that if you want to be emotionally resilient, you've got to start thinking about your own self first. It is very much about acknowledging who you are as a human being. How am I? What is my narrative? What are my stories? What's going on in my life that is making me who I am? So first, that's why the unconscious bias aspect is so crucial. So once you've started that and you're reflecting and not beating yourself up about it, only then can you start thinking about being more emotionally resilient.
Smita, there's one question that's coming on the chat, and I think a lot of people will associate with that, which is that, how do you deal with yourself when I'm forced to lie to my vendors or contractors because my organization doesn't support or keep up its commitment and it conflicts with mine?
That's a very tough one.
Yeah.
That's a very tough one. So thank you for asking that. Now, because what you're doing essentially is you're living a lie, aren't you? You are a person who has certain value system that you hold very dearly. And you are working within an organization who does not match your value system, very simply put. Unfortunately, you're going to have to compartmentalize, or I'm sorry, you're going to have to leave, which is not easy to say. And, people are losing jobs at the moment because of coronavirus around the world. So I wouldn't advise you to leave. I'd advise you to be selfish. I'd advise you to stick on and do the job, but I would also advise you not to take it personally and have sleepless nights. If you have been asked to, and the word you're choosing is lie, which is a big word, and it is making you very uncomfortable, if you can, and I suspect you can't, otherwise you wouldn't have asked the question, I would speak to my line manager first and be open, if I can. And listen, I'm having a real problem with this line of communication. It doesn't sit well with me. But if you don't feel confident in having that communication with your line manager because the value system of your company doesn't match you personally, then you're just going to have to zip that mouth and you have to say, that is work. That is not me as a human being. I'm going to focus on it and I'm going to do what I have to do. And the first opportunity I get, I'm going to try and get a job that fits my value systems. And that's unfortunate. I wish I had a simpler answer. Because one aspect of, when I do a longer workshop on emotional resilience, what I do is I get a group of people. So, I think there were about 50, 60 people today. And I would give you all a piece of paper with 20, how many? I can't even remember now. 30 different values I put on that piece of paper, which are, for example, friendship, religion, being rich, high integrity, getting the best no matter what, whatever it might be. I've got a whole bunch of stuff. And then what I ask them to do is I get the group to look at that list, read it through, and then reduce that to the top 8. So they reduce it the top from 30 to make it 8. And then from the 8, I ask them to make it 4. And then I ask them to make the 4. I give them a piece of paper and I ask them to write on, I tear the paper into 4 pieces and I ask them to write 1 each on those 4 pieces of paper. So now they ended up with 4 pieces of paper. And then, these are the days when we were not in Zoom land, I would literally go with a dustbin to each of them and ask them to throw 1 into the bin. And these people say, no, I'm not going to throw that in the bin. It's really important to me. I say, you have to. So the end of the exercise, they end up with 1 value, just 1 piece of paper. And then I get them all to read it out aloud. I promise you, there has never been a time where I've had maximum of maybe 2 people who share the same values. So what does that then mean in how you communicate at work? How do you become emotionally intelligent and manage the best? Now, I don't know, if I haven't done that exercise, I don't know that you have a different value system to me, right? And your value system could be that you achieve the top at all costs. My value system is about being rich, and somebody else's value system is about being friendly, and the 4th person's value in getting friends, only friendships, and the 4th is something else. How are they all going to work together if we're coming from such completely different value systems and we don't know it? Because those are our unconscious biases, right? And we have no idea about it. So, very simply put, people will have stuff. If your large company culture is completely against your own value system rather than one person, then unfortunately it's a question of thinking about how you manage it emotionally. Switch off, compartmentalize, and when you can, find a better job.
How do you respond and not react to everyday upheavals? I think this is a very classic question because most of us tend to react, so we either get angry or feel sad or happy because we're just reacting.
It's a knee-jerk, right? The reaction we're talking about is a knee-jerk reaction. And if you are self-aware enough, you will acknowledge that you mustn't have a knee-jerk reaction. And there are other things that you might make you react. For those of us who are women in this group and who have periods, when you're having your period, often you are far more emotionally volatile than when you're not having a period. And therefore you react much faster. Now, I remember saying to my children, and it's hard work bringing up, I have 3 sons. And I would say to my sons, listen, I might be slightly more irritable these days, and it's because I'm going through my period. And I remember saying this to them. Let them, we just show your vulnerability. Nobody's perfect. Or it could be that you're physically exhausted. I'm not just talking to the women now. It's been a very long day and you're wiped out. You will get irritable and you will react far quicker than you have slept, maybe for whatever reason you didn't sleep well last night. You've only had 3 hours sleep and you're wiped out and the whole day you're tired. And now somebody says something to you at work and you bark at them like a dog. As soon as you bark, which you do because you can't control yourself, say, listen, I'm really sorry. It's actually, you know what, I only slept 3 hours last night. I know I'm overreacting. Be honest, be open. That's all I can say. You have to try. It's easier said than done, though. You know, I mentioned briefly earlier when I was talking that I've now created a podcast, which I launched during, while I was locked down in India. And essentially, if you Google my name and you Google stories of unconscious bias, you will find the podcast if you like to listen to podcasts. And the podcast will tell you a lot about emotional resilience. Because what I have done is I have interviewed people around the world, many of them, 50% of the people I've interviewed I've never even met. And they talk to me about their stories, their life experiences, and how are they managing whatever's going on in their life. And you might find some kind of connection and say, oh yeah, that makes sense. Maybe I'll try that. I don't know, you might. So I'm just suggesting that you can if you want to.
So I would like to thank Smita and for her wonderful insights. And like we already told you, you are not going to learn everything about emotional intelligence in an hour. So what Smita has done is she's pointed you and turned you in the right direction, like the tip of the iceberg. And what we need to do now is to kind of read up about it. It is there innately in many of us. It's just that we need to be mindful about it and start practicing it. So thank you very much.